Okay, I'll be here. Assalamu alaikum. I seek refuge in Allah against misleading and being misled. I seek refuge in Allah against being betrayed and being betrayed into ignorance by others. I ask Allah to guide my heart and to guide my tongue and to guide me in what I'm going to depart this afternoon. And I thank Allah so much for allowing me to be here at the Ar-Rashidun Center, where they have welcomed us. My name is Bilal Sunni Ali. I'm the Emir of IJAN. IJAN is the Imam Jamil Action Network. We are we are the arm. We are not the legal arm, but we are what we call the advocacy arm of the fight of the campaign to free and exonerate Imam Jamil. Today is March. Today is March the 19th. March the 16th in 2000 was 21 years ago. So today is we're 21 years from the time that Imam Jamil was wrongfully incarcerated. It was a shooting incident that took place near our Masjid in Atlanta. And the morning after that shooting incident, a man confessed to that crime. He made a verbal confession to his parole officer, and the man's name was Otis Jackson, also known as James Santos. He's also known as Silas Muhammad. But this same person with these three names that he's known by is the same person that was in a shooting incident in the West End the night before. And on that morning, he told his parole officer that he had been in a shooting incident and that he had been shot. The policeman who was shot in the shooting incident said that they had shot their assailant. So within less than 12 hours after the shooting incident, we had a man who confessed. You had a man who confessed to the police, and you had also had a man within the next 2 days who went before the television cameras and explained to them that he knew for sure that Imam Jamil had not shot any police officers on that night. They asked him, could he prove it? And they asked him, would he swear to it? They asked him, would he stake his life on it? And he said yes to both, that he would stake his life on that. So since that time, we have been in this continued struggle to free and exonerate Imam Jamil Al-Amin. So IJAN, the Imam Jamil Action Network, is that advocacy arm of that struggle to free and exonerate Imam Jamil. We want to begin our program today by having the Emir, not the Emir of IJAN, but the Emir of the Jamaat that we function with. Imam Jamil has appointed Brother Issa, Imam Issa Abdul-Kareem of the New Darul Islam movement. He's with Taha Masjid in Long Island, New York, and he opened today with a Khutbah. We had a Khutbah today opened by Imam Abdul Ali of the Ar-Rashidun Center, but Imam Issa Abdul-Kareem, who is our Emir, our national Emir, in acting on behalf of Imam Jamil, has opened with a khutbah at Masjid Taha. And so you're going to now be listening to Imam Issa Abdul-Kareem. Imam Issa Abdul-Kareem is a member of the New Darul Islamic movement. He was a member of good standing for many years with the Darul Islam movement. When Imam Jamil took his Shahada, he took it with a member of the Darul Islam movement in Brooklyn, New York. And soon they asked him to come to the Jumu'ahs, and he attended. And soon after attending the Jumu'ah, he accepted Islam and he took his Shahada. And since then, he has been a strong Muslim leader. So I want to bring forward to you now, as we begin our forum on called A Community Under Siege, we want to bring you Imam Issa Abdul-Kareem.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah alladhi ja'ala yawm jum'ati sayyid al-ayami wa la nahmadu wa la nasta'innu ilayhi wa huwa alladhi farada salatu jum'ati bi khalihi ta'ala ya ayyuha alladhina amanu idha nudiya lis-salati min yawm al-jum'ati fas'u إلى ذكر الله وزار بعيد والصلاة على محمد سيد العالم وعلى آله وأصحابه القرآن. All praise is due to Allah, who gave Friday superiority over all other days. We neither worship nor seek the assistance of any other except that of Allah alone, who has made the Jumu'ah prayer obligatory on all Muslims by saying, O believers, whenever you are called to the Jumu'ah prayer, hasten to the mosque and remember Allah and quit business. We send countless blessings on the Holy Prophet Muhammad, who is the spiritual leader of all humanity, and on his offsprings and on his honorable companions. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة. Allah has purchased of the believers their lives and their goods, for theirs in return is the garden of paradise. And Imam Ahmed, on the authority of Jaber, gave the following details. The Ansar, or helpers, asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the principles over which they would take a bay'ah. The Prophet alaihi wassalatu wasalam, he answered, number one, to listen and obey in all sets of circumstances. Number two, to spend in plenty as well as in scarcity. Number three, to enjoin good and forbid evil. Number four, in Allah's service, you will fear the censor of none. And number five, to defend me in case I seek or need your help, and debar me from anything you debar yourselves, your spouses, and children from. And if you observe those precepts, paradise is in store for you. Assalamu alaikum. Now, in order to understand what I just read, in order to fully understand what I just read, It is important for me to go back again to Al-Asa al-Nubuwah, the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, this time was split up into two periods. It was the Meccan period and there was the Medina period. And in reality, what we're talking about here is one of the important bay'ats, the bay'at of Al-Aqaba, under which was the landmark for the beginning of the Medina period. In other words, this bay'at was the first institution of government. And the ulama are scholars in political science, the Islamic scholars in political science. They say that any legislation that came down in the form of revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the Medina period, that it was statutory law. Or any decision or judgment that was made by Rasulullah alayhi wa salatu salam during the Medina period, that it was statutory rule. Any decision or judgment that was made by the Khalifa Ar-Rashidun during the Medina period came under the category of statutory rule, meaning that that community set the precedence for all communities that would follow them. And therefore, this bay'ah, which clearly points out the 5 principles of the bay'ah, it not only applies to the Prophet ﷺ and his community, but it applies to all those communities that came behind him, all those ummahs that came behind him. And it also applies to the same bay'ah that is taken to the Amir. This is very important because it brings about a state of understanding the difference between what we refer to as responsibility and accountability. Because the Prophet ﷺ, even though he might have some private security that might be assigned to him through a bureaucratic system, it does not take away the ultimate responsibility that has been established in the bay'ah, in which those who are the citizen of the bay'ah, they say, are told by the Prophet ﷺ to defend me in case I seek or I need your help. This becomes the responsibility of the citizens of the bay'ah. An illustration: everyone knows that the state of Israel has a very formidable security. The ISF is world renowned. They're world known for being one of the best securities on the planet, particularly in the area of counterterrorism. But it is no secret that the citizens of Israel are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that is to say that if Israel is under attack, that those citizens suddenly are transferred from the aspect of citizenship to becoming soldiers. Well, we're talking about the same aspect here when we're referring to the 5 principles of the bay'ah. Again, the final responsibility rests upon the citizens of the bay'ah. And Al-Abbas bin Ubaidah bin Nahla, in this context, remarked, "O ye people of Khazraj, do you know the significance of the pact that you are entering into with this man? You are in fact
There you go. I have to go back. Assalamu alaikum. His phone is backstage. I'm looking at it right now, waiting for you to accept it. And your lighting isn't good right there. You should come on the better lighting. Yeah, put the chair.
Are they back online again?
Yeah, she's gonna set you in, but your lighting is bad. See you, but I can't hear.
That's why I tried to get you to get Muhammad down here.
No, it's not that. their link is to an email. Run the broadcast again.
We're going to go live now. You're on. I can hear you.
I really don't.
You can talk. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Talk. You can talk. You know, whatever you want to talk. You can address the people. Might want to apologize for that.
Assalamu alaikum. Let me open up, inshallah, by Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abdu rasuluhu. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amma ba'd. We apologize for whatever technical down in the form of revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the Medina period, then it was statutory law. Or any decision or judgment that was made by Rasulullah alayhi wa salatu salam during the Medina period, then it was statutory rule. Any decision or judgment that was made by the Khalifa Ar-Rashidun during the Medina period came under the category of statutory rule, meaning that that community set the precedence for all communities that would follow them. And therefore, this bay'ah, which clearly points out the 5 principles of the bay'ah, it not only applies to the Prophet ﷺ and his community, but it applies to all those communities that came behind him, all those ummahs that came behind him. And it also applies to the same bay'ah that is taken to the Amir. This is very important because it brings about a state of understanding the difference between what we refer to as responsibility and accountability. Because the Prophet ﷺ, even though he might have some private security that might be assigned to him through a bureaucratic system, it does not take away the ultimate responsibility that has been established in the bay'ah, in which those who are the citizen of the bay'ah, they say, are told by the Prophet ﷺ to defend me in case I seek or I need your help. This becomes the responsibility of the citizens of the bay'ah. An illustration: everyone knows that the state of Israel has a very formidable security. The ISF is world renowned. They're world known for being one of the best securities on the planet, particularly in the area of counterterrorism. But it is no secret that the citizens of Israel are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that is to say that if Israel is under attack, that those citizens suddenly are transferred from the aspect of citizenship to becoming soldiers. Well, we're talking about the same aspect here when we're referring to the 5 principles of the bay'ah. Again, the final responsibility rests upon the citizens of the bay'ah. And Al-Abbas bin Ubaidah bin Nahla, in this context, remarked, "O ye people of Khazraj, do you know the significance of the pact that you are entering into with this man? You are in fact avowing that you will fight against all and sundry, and if you fear that your property will be at stake, or the lives of your nobles will be in danger, then leave him now." This is before the bay'ah. Not after, before the bay'ah. Because if you do this after the pledge, it will be degrading for you both in this world and the world to come. But if you think that you can carry out what you are called upon to do in spite of the loss of precious lives and property, then undertake this heavy responsibility, and I swear by Allah, herein lies the good of this world and the good of the hereafter. In addition to understanding the principles of the bay'ah, it is now important that the citizens of the bay'ah understand the significance of the bay'at that they're taking, the responsibility of the bay'at that they're taking, the repercussions of the bay'at that they're taking, the ramifications of the bay'at that they are taking. Don't tell me that when you took the bay'at to Imam Jamil Alameen, that you didn't know that he was H-Rap Brown. Because it insults my intelligence and it destroys yours. Because once you took the bay'at to Imam Alameen, to Imam Jamil Alameen, then all of his adversaries, past, present, and future, immediately became yours. This is understanding the significance of the bay'at. And then we get into the whole aspect of reciprocate. The Imam has to reciprocate the bay'at. And the word reciprocate, it means respond to a gesture or action by making a corresponding one. I mean, we basically talking about here is Newton's third law. And that is, to every action, there's an opposite or equal reaction. So that there can be no reaction unless there's action. If there's no action, there's no reaction. And so therefore, the responsibilities of the citizen of the bay'at to protect the Amir, if they don't fulfill their responsibility, and as a result of that, he becomes a prisoner of war, and that prisoner of war status causes him to be in a position where he's incapable of reciprocating the bay'at, then that responsibility does not fall on him, but it falls on those who took the bay'at. This was the concept during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, al-Asa al-Nubuwwah. This is how the citizens of the bay'at saw this during his time. The Prophet ﷺ received information from reliable sources, attesting to the real intrigues and the plots being hatched by the enemies of Islam. Precautionary measures were taken and a state of alertness was called, including the positioning of security guards around the house of the Prophet ﷺ and strategic junctions. Aisha radiallahu anha reported that Allah's Messenger ﷺ lay down on bed or in his bed during one night on his arrival in Medina and said, "Were there a pious person from amongst my companions who should keep a watch for me during the night?" And she, Aisha radiallahu anha, said, "We were in this state when we heard the clanging of noise of arms. And he, the Prophet ﷺ, said, 'Who is it?' And he said, 'This is Sa'id bin Abi Waqqas.' And Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, 'What brings you here?' And thereupon he said, 'I harbor fear lest any harm should come to Allah's Messenger ﷺ. So I came to serve as a senator or a sutra.' And Allah's Messenger ﷺ invoked the blessings upon him, and then he slept." So there was no bureaucratical appointment. There was no assignment. There was only an individual who understood the significance of the bay'at, who understood the principles of the bay'at. And therefore, in recognition and understanding that the Prophet ﷺ was in a state of danger, he realized that it was his responsibility to go to his house and to pull sutra on him. It's just as easy as that. And then you have the situation at the Battle of Badr, where the Prophet ﷺ, he was about to take a small band, a small army of men out of Medina, and they were going into the battlefield to meet the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he stopped them for a while so that he could hold shura. Because it wasn't really clear in relationship to the jurisdiction of the bay'ah. Did it only apply to those, the territory that existed within Medina? Or did it apply to the territory that was outside of Medina? And this is what some of the citizens of the bay'ah said. Al-Miqdad bin Amr got up and said, "O Messenger of Allah, proceed where Allah directs you to, for we are with you, and we will not say as the children of Israel said to Moses, 'Go you and your Lord and fight, and we will stay here.' Rather, we will say, 'Go you and your Lord fight, and we will fight along with you.'" One of the things that the citizens of the bay'ah during the time of the Prophet ﷺ was concerned about more than anything else was having him in a situation where he's stuck somewhere in the woods of Alabama and he's going up against 200 adversaries by himself, and the citizens of the bay'ah are sitting home chilling out. That was one of their greatest fears. And Sa'id bin Mu'adh said, "We give you our firm pledge of obedience and sacrifice. We will obey you most willingly in whatever you command us. And by Allah, who has sent you with the truth, if you are to command us to plunge into the sea, we will do that most readily, and not a man of us will stay behind." And Sa'id bin Mu'adh went on to suggest that a trellis be built for the Prophet ﷺ to function as a headquarters for the Muslim army and to place providing reasonable protection for the leader. In other words, what they said to the Prophet ﷺ, they said, "We don't even want you to go in the back against your adversaries. We'll find some headquarters for you, and you stay at the headquarters, and we'll have a group of security surround you to protect you. And meanwhile, what we'll do is we'll go into battle and fight your adversaries." This was the understanding. This was the perception during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-Asa al-Nubuwwah. Now, I'm very familiar with the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he said that chess is a waste of time. And rightfully so, because you cannot stop the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by playing games. But there are some very significant rules in the game of chess. And these rules are compatible with the universal rules of law. First rule is you must protect the king. And that if the king is in a situation where he's in check, you got to get him out of there. And if the king is slain and he's in checkmate, then in the words of Vince Carter, the game is over. It's no more game. Now I think in studying my people, and when I say my people, I'm talking now primarily to those people who share a certain historical experiences. Talking about the African American Muslim, the indigenous Muslim in this country, that historically we tend to, when we enter into agreement, we do it on the basis of fitrah. And what is fitrah? Fitrah is natural instinct. It is acting without the concept of thought. So someone comes to us and they say, you down? Yeah, I'm down. I don't know what I'm down when, I'm just down. That was the concept that we had when we were ex-gangbangers, former members of SNCC, former members of the Black Panther Army. That was the attitude that we had. And so I think that when you take that understanding and you couple it with the reality of the fact that there may be a traumatic experience that may spiral out of control to such a degree that the human brain does not have time to process what's going on. And so it may look like or may justify, but it doesn't justify. It may be understandable, but not justifiable, why the community under the leadership of Imam Jamil Al-Amin dropped the ball. Because that's what happened. We dropped the ball. We can't blame that on him. That falls on us. Because we didn't understand the significance and the ramifications and the repercussions of the bad. Now I'm going to try to bring it on around now. A lot of people don't realize, but that Imam Jamil was a prisoner of war before he re-embraced the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I say re-embrace, I'm talking about as a revert. He was a prisoner of war as A-Trap Brown. And there was a reason. Because he said something out of his mouth that was very profound. And it shook this whole government up. He did a psychosocial on the government and the American people. One that caused debates to come after it years later. I used to see it on the news. I used to give him a call and say, they talking about you on the news. They're discussing the statement that you made years ago. And they're asking the question whether or not your analysis was correct. And that statement was, he said that violence in America he said violence in America is as American as cherry pie. This is what he said. And turned the whole country out. They had to put him in jail. They had to get him off the streets. He became a political prisoner. When he came home, he stayed on the streets for close to 20 years. And during the time of those 20 years, he did not once talk about anything that was political. It was always about the establishment of community and the concept of Salah, particularly the Fajr and the Isha prayer. He used to pound that in it on us. Fajr and Isha, Fajr and Isha. Hardest on the hypocrites, Fajr and Isha, Fajr and Isha. To such a degree, the members of the overall African American community, most of them began to forget about him. And eventually it was almost like he was never there. Then something happened, and this is very important. This is why I'm bringing this up. There was a big SNCC convention that took place in Washington, D.C. And during that SNCC convention, there were members, or former members of SNCC, former chairmen of SNCC, and they were all coming together to give some type of honor and respect to Kwame Ture, who at that particular time was known as Stokely Carmichael. And when we walked in, Imam Jamil walked in dressed like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was surrounded with 30 brothers who were all dressed in black fatigues and boots. So it immediately caught the attention of all the old-time revolutionaries. And everybody, the who's who, was there. I mean, I believe Wesley Snipes was filming the situation. Farrakhan was there. Everybody was there. Everybody showed up. And when he walked in, people were asking me, is that A-Trap Brown? Is that A-Trap Brown? Because they hadn't seen him in years. And so all the other speakers, when they got up, they started talking about the 60s and the 70s. What we did in the 60s and the 70s. And then Imam Jamil got up and he caught everybody off guard. The first thing he said was, if this was all about the 60s and the 70s, if your understanding of struggle was left in the 60s and the 70s, then you have failed to bring about a sense of closure, and that there can be no closure until every wrong has been made right. And then he began to invite them. He invited Stokely Carmichael to the Deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gave that invitation to Minister Farrakhan to come into the pure Deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He invited all the people that was there to come into the Deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he said to them that the struggle is not over. This is the supreme struggle. This is the ultimate struggle. That the evolutionary process has been completed, and now I'm inviting you into the final struggle, and that is the struggle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Turn the place out. Ended it with a statement from the last poets. Blessed are those who struggle. Oppression is worse than the grave. Better to die for a noble cause than to live and die a slave. Turned it out, standing ovation. He gave the dawah. And then after that, he began to travel throughout the country promoting his book. And the name of the book was called Revolution by the Book. And whenever he would go into different places to speak, to promote his book, he always had close to 10 to 15 brothers surrounding him, and they were dressed in black. There was a message coming from him. A message that came all the way back to the concept that put him in the prison and put him in jail the very first time, and that was that violence is as American as cherry pie. And the only language that this man understands is violence. What was he saying? Now he's calling people to the book. He's calling them to come to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's dressed like Rasulullah alayhi wa salatu salam. And he's surrounded by these brothers dressed in black, wearing fatigues. And he's giving a message. What is the message? I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that there are only two ways to peace. And either it's peace through surrender, which is what most of your oppressors want you to think. All you got to do is just surrender to our oppression and you can have peace. Or there's peace the way it was established by Rasulullah alayhi wa salatu salam through negotiation. It comes only one way. You have to negotiate from a position of strength. And negotiation from a position of strength means that you have to have an army. And so as the Imam was traveling throughout the country, just like Rasulullah alayhi wa salatu salam, and he was giving this message, revolution by the book, this is what he was saying to the people. Follow the path of Rasulullah alayhi wa salatu salam. Do what he did, establish the peace through negotiation, but before that peace through negotiation could take place, you gotta have an army. And he had 10, 15 brothers always there dressed in black with boots. The powers of, I should say the powers that be. The powers that be said, oh, we gotta get this man out of here. I mean, he's worse now than he was before. He's worse now as Imam Jamil than he was when he was A-Trap Brown. We gotta get him out of here. And they began to institute or reinstitute the concept of COINTEL. Now some of you brothers are young and you may not understand that concept of COINTEL. But real briefly, the Nation of Islam, going at it with Malcolm X, COINTEL. The confusion that took place within the Black Panther Party, COINTEL. And the COINTEL movement goes even back further than that. It goes back to thousands of years ago. The situation that happened with Issa alayhi salam, Jesus Christ, COINTEL. Because in COINTEL, one of the first things that happens is that someone within your movement, they got to get paid. In this case, of course, it was Judas. And then you have the situation with Peter, who's supposed to be the person to whom Jesus is talking about building his church upon him, because the word Peter means rock. And he said, you are the rock under which I'm going to build my church, according to what the Christians said. When it came time to dealing with the Roman government, the Roman police, and they asked him, do you know this man? He said, I don't know this man. I don't know who you're talking about. Never seen him before. This is what happens with COINTEL. And so the same thing began to happen within the movement. The reason why you didn't see the manifestations of it is because there were imams for the last 20 years that were alive, and their position was to hold the line. Such as Imam Luqman from Detroit, Imam Khalil from North Carolina. Their position was hold the line. And unfortunately, when they left, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took their lives, Rahimullah, then the COINTEL movement began to complete its movement. Now, I'm telling you all this for a reason, of course, in closing. He risked his life. He risked his life, not only for us, but for the indigenous people in America. Because he had made it a point that he wasn't coming back again. And he took that final step and went back out there, and as a result of that, the people began to move on him. His capture is not an accident. His capture is, in fact, that he is a political prisoner, because this is a political war. And therefore, we have to use the political aspects, the political science that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in the Quran and through the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah alayhi wa salatu salam, in order to compete with the adversaries. And so in closing, my call is upon all those who still consider their commitment to the Imam to be a commitment that is worth standing for. And my call is to come to this final quest, and that is to do everything that we can do, everything humanly possible, that anything that we can do to bring him home, to bring our Amir home, to bring our leader home, to bring Imam Jamil home, to bring H. Rap Brown home. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strengthen us and help us in our endeavor. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkelu alayhi. Na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا عبد رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. كم سنة
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت صلاة قد قامت صلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We welcome you to our 3-day program on Imam Jamil Alameen. The title of our program is A Community Under Siege. We have set up 3 beautiful days that started off today with Yom Jumuah in New York with Imam Issa, here at the Ar-Rashidun Community Center in Washington, D.C. Imam Ali was the Khatib. What we would like to do at this point, we want to bring Sheikh Bilal on, and we want Brother Bilal to have a nice heart-to-heart conversation with you with an open welcome invitation to enjoy us with this weekend. And most important, we want you to enjoy yourself. Assalamu alaikum. Sheikh Bilal.
I'm ready. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Seek refuge in Allah against misleading and being misled. Seek refuge in Allah against betrayal and being betrayed into ignorance by others. I ask Allah to guide my heart and to guide my tongue. And I ask Allah to guide my heart and to guide my tongue and to guide me and protect me and the things that I have to say this afternoon. And the one thing that I want to say is that I'm very happy to be here. As before, I'm saying we're very pleased that the Ar-Rashidun Center has welcomed us here in Washington, D.C., has welcomed you all to come to the Ar-Rashidun Center to have this very important discussion. And I'm seeing brothers and sisters that I know from around the country and from here in D.C., who I know have been supporters of Imam Jamil for a long time. I remember from day one, from the very first day, I'm looking at a brother, Maurice Salah Khan, who lives here in Washington, D.C., who I can remember from the very first day when I showed up in Brooklyn, when I showed up in Washington to speak, and my next stop was Brooklyn. Brother Maurice Salah Khan asked me, how was I going to get to Brooklyn? And I said I was going to catch the Amtrak. And he says, no, we're going to go in my car. And from that was my introduction. I had met him before, but now I knew him. Now we were acting as brothers. We were traveling together, and we were in support of Imam Jamil Abdul Alameen. And we went on to Brooklyn, and we met up with Brother Jihad Abdul Mukmit, who you'll hear from later on during this session. Brother Jihad Abdul Mukmit, who became the leader, one of the co-chairs of the organization known as Jericho Amnesty Movement on behalf of political prisoners. The Jericho Amnesty Movement on behalf of political prisoners has done tremendous work in supporting political prisoners. And what I'm going to ask you to do for the next several hours is to watch a video. It's a program that we have created. It's be an ongoing program, and it's called Real to Real, REAL to REEL. We put the reality to the real of the the film reel. So it's the Real to Real that we're going to be watching now, and it's a composite of various videos. It's some have described it as a video film festival, where there's discussion brought forth by Imam Jamil Abdul Alameen. There's discussion brought forth by Brother Mumia Abu Jamal. There's discussion being brought forth by Russell Maroon Schultz. there's discussion being brought forth by Jalil Muntakin. Many of you may not know who Jalil Muntakin is. Jalil Muntakin is a brother who spent just a few weeks short of 50 years behind bars, and he has been, and he, and when he was released, he was told by his parole officer to go down to the social services and see what they have for him. And when he did that, he filled out papers that would offering him food services, medical services, and there was also a voter registration form in it. Rather than tell him you can't fill out the voter registration form, they let him fill out the voter registration form. And when they did, they came to his house and arrested him for voter fraud, saying that parolees are not allowed to vote. So this was not an attempt to break the law. This was merely an attempt to fulfill what his parole officer had said, to do what he had, to see what they had for him. And what they had for him was actually a what we call a rouse, a pretension. And what they were pretending to do was offering him something so that he would fill this paper out. And instead of telling him merely, you can't fill this out, they let him fill it out and then charged him with voter fraud. And that's hanging over his head right now. We have a fight in New York, in the upstate New York, in the Rochester area, in order to keep Brother Jalil Muntakin out on the street with us. He's just done 50 years. So without any further ado, we want to invite you to continue being a part of this program and to spend the next few hours watching this program, Real to Real, a series of video clips, some short, some long, about various political prisoners.
Prophet ﷺ has said, never petition Allah for armed combat, but when it comes, be patient. Never petition, never pray to Allah for armed combat, never pray for war, but when it comes, be patient. And so therefore he gives us those tools that enables us to practice sabra, to develop sabra, prayer, fasting, charity.
See, it's no in between. You're either free or you're a slave. There's no such thing as second-class citizenship.
If we go to YouTube and search H. Rap Brown, I don't think there's anyone, I think his performance was unparalleled. After, he became Imam Jamil, we know the tremendous work that was done.
We seek refuge in Allah from a knowledge that is not useful, from a heart in which there is no remembrance, from a prayer that is unanswerable, from a tongue that is not truthful, and from a soul that is ungrateful.
I don't think we either know or we give the proper appreciation for the work that Imam Jamil, even before embracing Islam in 1971. Imam Jamil was one of the most fearless individuals that they had ever met. African-American men said that they found their manhood. They found how to express their manhood in the face of conflict because of the example and the words of Imam Jamil. The loss for almost the last 20 years that the Muslim community has suffered. It's a loss that has been, to a certain degree, suffered by the non-Muslim community as well. Even after this bogus conviction, he's still not able to publicly speak about the situation.
Now it's time to kind of scrub that clean and get him back to, you know, the position of reverence that he deserves to be in, because he's done so much for us at this point as a ummah and as Black people. So they understand the power of his words, you know, to move people to whatever action. You know, that's the reason why he's in federal custody at this moment. It's because, you know, they put the leader of the Aryan nation in a cell next to him and they got to talking and he took shahada.
That's true.
You know, after that, they were like, okay, federal custody, solitary, we don't have time for this. And we can't let you speak to anybody. But they knew that, you know, all the way back in the trial. So the current gag order is an unofficial gag order. Basically, it's just if you request an interview, they're going to say no. And the most pervasive thing in all of this is that since before day one of the trial, the guy who did it said, I did it.
That you had committed a murder and were involved in the shooting of a cop in March of 2000 in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
All right. You weren't arrested for it, were you?
No, sir, I was not.
In fact, another person was tried and convicted.
Jamil Alameen, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Throughout the trial, they cheated time and time again. And when I say cheated, I mean cheated. From faulty ballistics, the lady who did the ballistics in our trial, who was, you know, hired by the state, she was fired from her job because she did faulty ballistics. Mm-hmm. The ballistics don't match. The description matches the guy who confessed. They said the man who shot these police officers was wounded. The guy who confessed was wounded. My father wasn't wounded. And so then all of a sudden the blood from that was found on the scene, they couldn't find a match because it didn't match the imam. All the way to the constitutional violation. They violated his constitutional rights a few times, but the most prominent one was they did a mock cross-examination where they asked him questions in the closing argument and then answered the questions for him to the jury after he exercised his right not to testify, because we believe that they didn't present a strong enough case that warranted him to have to testify. We proved that he didn't do it. It's just so many things that happened in this one trial. I mean, we have all these other things listed out and we want them to review that as well. But it's like, hey, look, this guy Otis Jackson, he's sitting in prison in Florida. He's telling you he did it. He's been telling you he did it. We have three affidavits from him. We have him on video. We have handwritten like every kind of confession you can possibly get from a guy, he gave us. So it's like, what do y'all want? Like, if nothing else, we deserve a new trial, but realistically, let the imam go. Like, let him go. Look, this isn't even in line with the man we know and love and have this respect for. If nothing else, he's told you he didn't do this.
And verily, man has been created into toil and struggle, that it is a part and parcel of the development that you encounter in this life, that you must struggle. So therefore, in this sense, the best struggle, the best way to be able to struggle deals with following the guide.
On the move. It's been 2 years now into the Obama administration. And despite the hopes of millions who voted for him, the wars are getting worse, not better. The Obama administration is engaged in more predator attacks than the Bush administration, and there are rumblings for a war with Iran. Meanwhile, the anti-war movement has been quiescent, as if Obama bombs are somehow better than Bush bombs. Isn't it time to heighten the anti-war movement? War poisons everything, for the state expands its reach and powers through war. Now is the time. Now is the season. Anti-imperialism is the perfect reason. Iraq, Afghanistan were false wars for oil, and it's about time to bring the anti-war movement to a boil. These wars aren't against foreign countries. They're against you, your jobs, your communities, your schools, your civil liberties. These wars have resulted in so-called black sites, secret prisons, torture, extraordinary rendition, attacks on Arab Americans and American Muslims, equally under Bush and Obama. They have bankrupted the Treasury, destabilized the region, and created the conditions for horrific blowback. So, ain't it about time to say this chant? Now is the time. Now is the season. Anti-imperialism is the perfect reason. Iraq, Afghanistan were false wars for oil, It's time to bring the anti-war movement to a boil. Thank you. From death row, this is Mumia Abu Jamal. These commentaries are recorded by Noel Hanrahan of Prison Radio.
Open your eyes, see, cause the revolution will be televised. I gained support, I came to court, cause the judge didn't even budge, didn't even look at him, shrugged and shook at him. He gave him life and threw the book at him.
Before we go, I wanted to end, Mark Lamont Hill, by asking you about what's happening with Mumia Abu Jamal, who is in prison in Pennsylvania. You co-authored a book with him years ago titled The Classroom and the Cell, Conversations on Black Life in America. Mumia's lawyers confirmed Wednesday he's tested positive for COVID-19, also has congestive heart disease. Mumia also suffers from pre-existing conditions of liver disease, which advocates say is directly related to the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections' failure to treat his hepatitis C in a timely fashion. His doctor, Dr. Ricardo Alvarez, says the only appropriate treatment is freedom. What do you think needs to happen now? And what was your response to hearing about his COVID-19 diagnosis?
I spoke to Mumia a week ago, right before he went into the hospital. He had labored breathing. He was clearly very ill. I didn't quite know what was going on, but I knew that he was very ill, and it was no surprise to hear that he was rushed to the hospital. They pumped almost 10 pounds of fluid of some sort out of his body. He's been made sick by this prison system, whether it's not treating his hep C, as you mentioned, or the fact that he got COVID. And there are no visitors coming in. There are no guests coming in. The only people who are giving and transmitting COVID through this prison are prison guards who come in. They don't wear masks, not just as a matter of policy, but as a matter of some weird right-wing principle. And as a result, people are dying. And so the only resolution, the only possible solution, the only fair solution is to let Mumia out of prison, not just Mumia, but all political prisoners, all people over 50, not just all political prisoners, quite frankly, although people like Russell Maroon Schultz, who's 77 years old and who survived COVID, but is suffering from cancer, should be sent home. All of our elders should be sent home. This is an opportunity to exercise COVID compassion. We've seen over the last 6 months.
Mark, we have 5 seconds.
Let them go, free them all.
Well, Mark Lamont Hill, I'm also glad to be talking to you with you being over COVID right now. Mark Lamont Hill and Mitchell Plitnick are co-authors of the book, Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics. Democracy Now! Produced with Renee Feltz, Mike Burke, Dina Guzder, Libby Rainey, Maria Taracena, Carla Wills, Tammy Warrenoff, Trina Nadura. Special thanks to Julie Crosby. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. Stay safe.
Philadelphia's top prosecutor plans to fight an order that would give convicted cop killer Mumia Abu Jamal a new appeals hearing. District Attorney Larry Krasner announcing just yesterday that he's challenging that decision that will revive the high-profile case. The 64-year-old former Black Panther is serving life without parole for the 1981 death of Officer Daniel Faulkner. The activist was granted a new appeals hearing after the Supreme Court said a former Pennsylvania justice who heard his last appeal had a potential conflict of interest.
When you think about the first time we met, what do you remember?
I remember I couldn't stand you. The first time we met, remember we played king ball, and with me and my sister and a girl across the street, we had a nice game going on, and here you come. When you got in the game, you just started slamming the ball, and you beat us so bad. I was so bad. And I remember, oh my God, I can't stand him. Who is that anyway? Because we had never saw you before, you know. And anyway, that was my first response to you.
When I think back to that day, it's hard to believe that y'all lived that close to us. You would think that we would have seen y'all, you know, in one of the neighborhood stores somewhere, but y'all have been around there for 5 years. We never saw you. And you were so pretty, you know. that's why we stopped. But the way we played king ball, you know, that's just the way we played. You know, you know.
Yeah, you told me that.
On our block, the girls played the same way, you know. So it was amazing that it was so, you know, the game wasn't as
traumatic for us.
no more contentious, really.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, more competitive,
Mhm.
I should say. That was a nice day. For me, it was a nice day.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What are your top 3 favorite memories we share?
The birth of our daughter.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that was something.
You know, you wake in one morning. It was a nice fall day. You know, and I knew something was strange because you was pacing back and forth. You know, and, you know, I knew how far along you were, and you just pacing back and forth. And I said, "Debbie, you already had a baby?" And you stopped pacing for a second and nodded your head, yeah, and just kept on pacing. And then, you know,
Yeah,
at some point you just lay down and had her, you know. So that was.
Assalamu alaikum. Just want to explain just briefly what's going on with Real to Real right now. You're watching Brother Mike Africa and Sister Debbie Africa, who are a married couple who spent the last 40 years in prison. The next video that you're going to see after that video is a video of Mike Africa Jr. After having his first dinner with his parents. He's almost 42 years old. His entire life, his parents have been in prison until last year when they were both released after 40 years, and he finally got to spend time with them outside of the prison visiting room. Okay, thank you very much. Just for an explanation.
You know, that was definitely one of the moments, you know, very memorable moment in our life. And then, of course, seeing you released from prison after 40 years, you know, and I'm watching all these events from prison myself, you know, because we had the same sentence. So
yeah, it's so many of them. It's hard to name the top 3, ain't it? The wedding, what about that?
it's hard to, you know, it's hard to beat that day too. But,
Yeah,
you know, being released from
3.
after 40 years is
really
hard to beat also.
Really, that's
right?
probably top.
And that's the other thing, because I didn't have a chance to see. As he was, you know, as you had him while we were both in prison when we first got arrested. Nearly a month later. So I never got a chance to be, you know, but of course we communicated throughout our time.
Oh yeah, that was another moment, huh?
So this is the first time I got a chance to be with him outside of prison visits, and so it's a tough top 3. That's something I'd have to. I couldn't do it here, I don't think.
It's just more than 3.
So throw them in the pot. Throw them all in the pot.
Yeah.
You know.
What's one experience you wish I never had?
Well, that's, you know, again, that's hard to give a one. There's a few things, you know, an experience I wish you never had in prison.
Yeah.
40 years sentence, unjustly. But mainly being torn away from my children. And certainly having your son in prison,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I knew that was going to be. Yeah.
So, and then if that wasn't bad enough, having to give him up in 2 days, you know. So, and traumatic experience of trying to raise him from prison, and you know, our daughter, our kids from prison, you know. So, and all the challenges that presented. So yeah, I wish you had never had to experience that, you know, and being in prison in the first place. And you know, our being separated. So
yeah, that's about I agree wholeheartedly. You know.
what do you think connects us?
To be honest, I really think what connects us is true love. I really do. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. You know, I feel like because your love was so strong for me, that's what made me love you the way that I do. And so that connection, you know, is there like that. But also a lot of things connect us. The work that it takes to be connected and stay connected. Our children connects us. And despite the fact that we haven't been in their lives for years, you know, is always something to keep us connected, to draw us together, to keep us talking, to keep us making decisions, to always have to be there for them, always have to do the best, very, very, very best that we could do, even though we were from a jail cell. And it would get faint at times, but because we wanted to stay connected, and because we always wanted to be together, we made it work. We make it work. You know, the work that it takes to have a relationship, as in any other relationship. You know, you have to work so that we can make what we want possible.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't know what people would think when they think about prison, and each of us doing such a long sentence. And they may feel that it's a natural thing to stray, to go somewhere else, to look somewhere else. You know, but to me, that's like saying, well, I'm going to betray my brother because I'm in prison. You know, so it'd be the same thing about your spouse. You know, why would you think of betraying your spouse just because you're in prison any more than you would your brother just because you're in prison? You know? And I think people see that relationship is different, but loyalty is one thing.
Yeah, and people don't realize that you can still stray in prison. You know, just because you're behind bars does not mean that you can't, that you don't have access to the things that you have on the street. You know, alcohol, drugs, women, men. You know, it's all there too, just like on the street. So prison don't keep you from, you know, doing the things that you would do on the street that causes a relationship to go bad. So, you know.
Takes the same commitment, the same work.
Yep. Because for real, the streets are the prison, really. When do you feel closest to me?
I don't know. I have, you know, situations with my family. You know, I have, you know, I have sisters who have challenges. You know, half my family's gone now since we've been in prison. You know, sometimes with the restrictions we have about travel. You know, whenever we get the chance, you know, we have them over for dinner, or we go down to their house. Or, you know, I appreciate it when I want to spend more time with them. And maybe you had plans of your own, you know, you don't mind putting your plans on hold sometimes. Then when I'm entertaining them, or the kids, you know, the girls, you make sure, you know, things are, you know, put together, and, you know, you cook splendid meals, and, you know, whatever that you think they might like, you know, you spread the house with their pictures, and, you know, that's really, you know, helpful to me, because like sometimes I'm really laid back or reserved, and I don't talk much, you know, even at home, you know.
Well, that's part of it too, because I feel like, you know, they're your daughters, and, you know, if I love you, so I have to love them too. And that's just the way I've always felt. You know, they're a part of me because they're a part of you. And, you know, it's real. That's the way I feel like it has to be in a relationship, because if you don't, it's just going to be constant chaos, or constant, you know, or just constant confusion, conflict, you know. So I want to love them, you know, I want to love them too. And that's just how I feel. I open my heart because I love you, and that's what the way I want to feel about them too. And I do, you know, as well as our two that we have together, you know, are still a part of our lives too. And you know, that's how I feel. That's how I feel.
What do you see for us in the next 5 years?
Oh man, what I see for us is definite success. Success in meaning that our family is going to be a lot closer. You know, we had a break because of, you know, what we went through being in prison 40 years. And so that, you know, that stretched the vibration, that, you know, that tore the family somewhat, a lot. But what I see in the next 5 years is that's what I see. I see it now. I see it coming now, especially when it comes to our family. You know, the people around us, our relatives, you know, and I think it's going to make a statement to others. I think it's going to help others, you know, because this has been a really challenging path that we've been on. And I think it's going to be an example for a lot of people, you know. I mean, if we can do it, you know, certainly people will use that as motivation, you know, to help bridge gaps between whatever, whether it be a marriage with a man, you know, with your partner, or your children, or other relatives, or other people that are, or relationships, friends, you know. So it's all encompassing, and that's, you know, that's a part of our belief, you know, that everything is encompassing, everything, it applies to everything. It's really no separation in life. It's just, you know, if it applies to us, it can apply to children, brothers, sisters, father, son, everything. But I see the 5 years as being great years for us. Okay, what does my love feel like?
What does it feel like? It feels great. It does, you know. Like he referenced a couple questions ago, you know, when there's no interference and there's no, you know, but that's, you know, those moments of interference is, you know, what gives you those challenges, you know, and that makes for a great result, I think, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
You have fights, you know, the ones who have the greatest challenges are the best ones, right? The best ones.
Yeah, afterwards.
The ones,
Don't feel like it then.
Yeah.
Afterwards, yeah.
Those are the ones that are the most
memorable one.
Yeah.
That connects us, like makes us closer, really.
Yeah. So we've had our challenges, and you know, it's gonna be hard to interfere any longer. You know what I mean? It's,
Yeah.
people going to have a definite challenge when they come messing with this relationship. You know, so we try and test the champions, man.
Champions, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Hey, so if that video moved you, if you dug it, if you want to see more of them, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification button so we can keep you updated about our weekly releases. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining.
When your belief is to protect life and you have a system that profits off of the enslavement of life, you got a fight on your hands. August 8th, 1978, Philadelphia Police Department came out to our house in a raid on our home because of some housing code violations. Some 400 Philadelphia police officers shot the house up, hundreds of rounds of ammunition. My mother was 8 months pregnant with me in that house. And shortly after that, I was born in a prison cell. Move had put so much pressure on the city to release the people. Mayor Wilson Good decided to do was fly a helicopter over our house and drop a bomb on it. The fire burned and killed 11 members of the organization. Move has been demonized. The mission of the Move organization is to encourage people to protect life, people, animals, and the environment. We have been made to be seen as violent, radical, crazy, anything that they could use to make people turn away from us so that people don't hear the actual message that we're about. Since I was a 13-year-old kid, I met with lawyers and investigators and people to try to help get my family out of prison.
Your name, sir? Mike Africa from the Move organization. Now I want to point out, I got 9 Move people sitting in prison right now doing 30 to 100 years for a crime they ain't commit, including my mother and my father. We got serious work to do. We ain't out here talking just to be talking. We run out information.
The first time that I ever saw my parents in street clothes outside of prison, I was 40 years old. There's the happy that they're home and getting to know them. There's the happy that they're home and feeling the relief that they won't die in prison. There's the happy that we as an organization, as a community, as a revolutionary movement, the people have made this happen. My mom, getting to know her, she came to her door and she opened the door and I realized that she was barefoot, right? And I look down, I look at her feet and I'm looking at them. And I realized that I didn't recognize them, you know? And I realized I didn't recognize them because I had never seen them before. So we're doing so many firsts together, you know? And it's just a really, really good feeling to just have that. You know, it was great.
I want to invite somebody to the stage who has been very important and instrumental in the growth of Dead Prayers and what our politics has meant in a real practical sense. You know what I mean? This person who has been, locked up all my life on behalf of our movement has presented to us some of the most vibrant social programs as it relates to our movement as it can be. Right now, he has released a new book, and I would like to bring his family, his son, to the stage. Anybody who has ever heard of him knows his knows that he has been the last 2 years right beside Mumia Abu Jamal and SCI Green, which is in Waynesboro, PA. And I want y'all to hear a few words in the update, because this is Black August, and this is what this is really about. You know what I'm saying? I would like to be out here updated from Russell Maroon Schultz III right now.
All right. Salute. Black August, y'all make some noise.
DC in the house. If you don't know who Russell is yet, hold on. I need DC to say free Maroon. Free Maroon. 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 Yeah,
bro, give it up for Dead Prez, y'all. Give it up for Dead Prez. I can't hear y'all. He's my comrades for 10, 15 years now. When they first started out in BK, they showed my dad love. They showed all the PPs love. They showed the community love. So basically, I'm out here to say that my dad just put out a new book. It's called Maroon the Implacable. If you don't know who the Maroons are runaway slaves. My dad escaped from prison twice. Attempted to escape from prison more than twice. Just basically, I'm here to say that I'll be here after my dad's birthday at Sankofa Books, selling this book. And please come out and support, because the same people who are putting this Black August event on are putting that event on the 25th at the Sankofa Bookstore at 4 o'clock. Also, we have a tour going on for my dad. It's called Public Service Announcement, PSA, okay? And PSA is supported by DPs, Talib, Young Chinlamu, and a host of artists that really do this type of work, you know? And so, once again, I would just like to thank y'all for coming out to see DPs. Thank y'all for supporting Black August. Dead Prez will be in Philadelphia at the Blockley, supporting PSA, the public service announcement. If you're in Philly, come on through and see Dead Prez. Maroon the Implacable, pick it up at your bookstore. Read it, it's a great book. It talks about eco-socialism. It talks about feminism and how we're supposed to really treat our women. You know what I'm saying? That's a big piece. You hear what Sticks say? It's a big thing. We gotta learn how to treat our women. Black August style. Treat your woman right, son. Get it right. All right? Love.
Black August, y'all make some noise.
Say free Maroon.
Free Maroon.
Say free Maroon.
Free Maroon.
Everybody, say free Maroon.
Free Maroon.
Say free Maroon.
Free Maroon.
And so the update on my dad, for all the work that y'all doing, for coming out and showing the love that y'all showing, my dad is in a step-down program, which means that, any prisoners in here? Anybody from prison in here? Anybody from the streets? Anybody ever get time up in this motherfucker? Huh? All right, so the step-down program means that he get to come out the hole every day instead of being locked down for 22 and 2 or 23 and 1, right? That means 23 hours you in the cell, or 22 hours you in the cell, and 1 hour you get to go take a piss, a shower, work out in a little dog cage, you know, whatever. All right, so because of y'all, my dad is now in the step-down program. After 20 years, give yourselves a hand. After 20 years of being in solitary confinement, lock yourself in your bathroom for 20 years, okay? Lock yourself in your bathroom for 20 years. That's what my dad did for y'all. Before y'all was born, most of y'all. People of color for sure, not just people of color, but non-people of color. Okay, read the book, Maroon the Implacable. We need coalition building. That means that we need work between white people, black people, gay people, lesbian people, okay? Because if you ain't down with gay and lesbian people, I ain't fucking with you, because I got gay and lesbian people in my family, and I'm fucking with them.
settlement is anything but the latest blow struck, unquote. Many people say Shotz's more than 2 decades stay in solitary confinement was retaliation for his activism. This is War Resisters League leader Matt Meyer speaking on Democracy Now! In 2013 about Russell Maroon Shotz's solitary confinement.
I think it's important for people to realize that despite whatever issues, political or otherwise, related to his conviction, the reason he's in solitary confinement is because he was elected by an official prison-approved body to be the head of this lifers group. And it was because he was seen correctly as a key organizer, even amongst his fellow inmates, that he was put into the hole. He was not put into solitary confinement initially, once convicted. It was only in an immediate and very direct reaction to his organizing work.
I have an FBI document here, all right? And it talks about the BLA and them being released from prison. That the BLA was involved in activities which involved the use of force or violence, substantially impairing the functioning of both the local and state government and U.S. government and branches that influence the U.S. government, right? BLA has not claimed credit for any illegal activities in the United States for almost 2 years, period. This is 1977, right? The major leaders of the group have been incarcerated for a wide area of crime. It appears that without their leadership, the BLA is no longer a viable group. Recently, some prominent BLA members have been released from prison, but all indications lead to the conclusion that they are not returning to the former lifestyle of crime and or guerrilla warfare. Contact the New York City Police Department representatives has failed to determine any information regarding the resurgence of the BLA or activities in the New York City area. Contact with these sources are familiar with the BLA activities in the past and has failed to develop any new information regarding BLA activity inside the New York City area or approximately for the last 2 years. Based upon the above, this investigation is being closed. This is 1977. So this indicates by their own investigation that the releasing of guys from prisons, they're not going back to criminal activities of any form. They're not engaging back into any type of guerrilla warfare, what they call guerrilla warfare. So there is actually no reason to not release them, okay?
My name is Messiah Rhodes. I have been mailing letters back and forth with Abdul-Kareem, aka Anthony Bottom, an ex-Black Panther Party Black Liberation Army member who has been denied parole over 10 times and remains imprisoned for over 46 years. I decided to speak with him face to face for the first time. Here's a brief edited version of our conversation out of our 2-hour time limit allowed within the maximum security Sullivan Correctional Facility in upstate New York on March 7th, 2018.
My name is Jalil Abdul-Kareem, aka Anthony Bottom. I've been in prison going on 47 years, one of the longest held political prisons in the United States, former member of the Black Panther Party and the BLA.
How many prisons have you, do you remember how many prisons have you been to over 40 years? What's the list?
The list?
Yeah.
Want me to name them all?
Yeah, you can.
Oh man, geez. California was Vacaville, Tracy, and San Quentin. New York, I've been Sing Sing, Clinton, Auburn, Attica, Comstock, Greenhaven, Shawangunk, did I say Auburn? Elmira, Sullivan. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, and some of them been to a couple of times. So I've been to Auburn 2 times, 3 times, been to Attica 3 times, been to Shawangunk 3 times, been to Greenhaven twice. Yeah.
So what's your access to the news and to the internet here? What kind of access?
We have no access to internet. That is forbidden. All right. News, there's television. We have this is not a TV facility, right? So there's a common room a common area where there's watching of television. But most of my news comes from NPR, and I listen to public radio, and I get my news from that, and also reading materials, New York Times, and various other publications that I've received. Keeps me up to breast to an extent that I possibly can, what's going on out in the world at large. Most recently, the movie The Black Panther seems to be inspiring people to look more closely into culture, their own culture, their history. I was reading the New York Times this morning where they're having young white kids wearing Black Panther masks. You know what I mean? And what does that mean? So there's a crossover in terms of challenging our sensibilities and issues of Black heroes and the questions of racism, that's being taught or, permeating a society now, just alt-right stuff. So we see that there is a evolving capacity for folks to look towards the future and resistance.
The last time you was in the shoe.
Last time I was in shoe was for teaching Black history class.
And how's it?
I was in Attica.
Yeah. It was in Attica?
I was in Attica, and they didn't like some of the subject matters I was teaching.
How did you get through that?
Well, December 5th, 2017, they came to myself, took me to SHU for, I was discussing a course. I've been teaching an Attica Black History class in Attica for about 2 months straight. And I started from 1861, and I was bringing up to 1960s. And so during 1960, naturally I had to talk about the Black Panther Party because one of the biggest things that was going on in this country at that time. And so I was making a comparison between the Black Panther Party and street organizations, particularly the Bloods, right? And the administration was not happy of the fact that I was making this kind of comparison. And they took my narrative and turned it into something completely different. And so they put me in the box for it. They put me in the SHU, saying I was trying to organize the gangs or something.
Is there white in the box? Is there dark? What is it?
No, SHU, no, it's not. It's just an isolation, right? And so I was out of the box for a month and a half, and then they put me in what they call the state shoe box or shoe facility, right, where everybody is locked in 23 hours a day, all right? And so you're in your cell 23 hours a day. You come out twice a week to take a shower, and you fed in your cell. The visits is behind a glass. It's and because of the structure of the area, it's noisy. The guys in their cell, and some of them are not well, right, mentally. And so there's a lot of noise, a lot of chaos. It's unpleasant, to say the least. And I think about going home. That's what I think about. Thinking about going home and being with my kids, being with a loving woman, thinking about having opportunities to really put some of these dreams and ideas that I've have over the years, and manifest them, I'm getting back to the community. I want to have my own home, all my siblings have their own house.
Where?
Well, two of my siblings, one of my siblings is in Georgia, and with my mom's in Georgia, and my mother's brothers and sisters in California, right? My daughter and her family's down in Alabama. So, yeah, I want to do that. I dream about traveling, of course, I want to visit various parts of the world that I just read about, over the years. It's in magazines and newspapers and books. I want to see if what I read is true. You know what I mean? If those things really exist. So yeah. So those are some of the things, man. That naturally, I want to be successful in other areas. Again, I'm like I said, I like to write. So my most recent book, Escaping the Prison, Fade to Black, poems and essays.
You got any poems right now over here, or?
No, I don't have them with me. If I had them, I wouldn't mind, but no, I don't have them with me. And I don't have them on cap.
Okay.
I'm not a rapper.
Okay.
So it's not there. But yeah, so my latest book, and so I have a novel that I've written that's unpublished, and I have a screenplay or teleplay that have not been produced. So those two things I'm going to try to hustle and make happen when I get out. Yeah, so.
Why don't people believe they're political prisoners in the United States?
Because well, generally speaking, because of the criminal justice system. Criminal justice system criminalizes everything, right? So I don't care what you get arrested for, or you're being criminalized. And so therefore, they treat any violation of the law or claimed violation, alleged violation of the law under criminal sanctions, all right, and criminal punishment. Also, on the basis of that alone, they do not give recognition to the existence of political prisons. It's ridiculous, you know, to consider that the only nation in the whole world, although the United States condemns everyone else for having political prisoners, claim that themselves do not have any. Fighting for my parole. There's a campaign to prevent us from being released from parole. The Police Benevolent Association, PBA, they have their own penal philosophy. And the penal philosophy is that anyone who's convicted of shooting or killing a police officer should never be released from prison. Mm-hmm. Although that's not according to the law does not say they should never be released from prison, but that's their penal philosophy, right? Which is, to a large extent, understandable because they are a fraternity of their own making. And they, so they have to naturally support their ideal of who they are in social order and society at large. But again, that is not the law, okay? And so they have used their influence, right, and to implement or try to implement the prevention of people being released from prison who are qualified to be released from prison, who should be released from prison, who have done their time and done it well.
What makes you hopeful about the world that you're going to come out into?
Hopeful?
Yeah.
Generation of the new generation makes me extremely hopeful. These young kids that's coming out now, these new kids who Trump, I was talking about Trump. Wow. He has created an environment or a political environment of resistance, right? And so by virtue of his personality, the way that he's trying to run the government, his support of what the alt-right, right, has created a resistance, a backlash. And so by virtue of that alone, we're finding that young people are now stepping up. And what I see in many respects is what was happening back in the 60s, evolving out of the civil rights movement. We see that level of resistance trying to evolve nowadays with these young people. And so that is, for me, that's hopeful.
Hello and welcome to the International Daily Roundup with People's Dispatch, where we bring you some of the top stories from across the globe. Let's take a look at today's headlines. Black Panther activist to be released on parole after 5 decades in prison. Jordanian king dissolves national parliament ahead of November elections. Transitional government in Mali names new civilian prime minister. Student groups protest highest fees for non-EU students in Austria. Fresh clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh. 68-year-old Jalil Abdul Muntakim, a former Black Panther and civil rights activist, is set to be released on parole after being in custody for over 49 years in the US. Muntakim, earlier identified as Anthony Bottom, was first imprisoned at the age of 19 after being convicted of killing two New York Police Department officers. His parole was rejected multiple times, even as it emerged that the evidence used to convict him was flawed. His release comes at a time when the US is witnessing mass protests against systemic racism and police killings since May. On September 23rd, the New York Parole Board passed the order for Muntakim to be released on parole before October 20th. The order came after he was hospitalized with COVID-19 in June. The order was only publicized days later by the board. Even though Muntakim was eligible for parole during his life sentence since 1998, his parole request was denied multiple times before. In August 1971, at the age of 19, Muntakim and his comrade Herman Bell were arrested over allegations of killing two NYPD officers, Beverly Jones and Joseph A. Piagentini, in a shootout in New York City. Another BPP activist, Albert Washington, was also arrested along with Muntakim and Bell over the alleged murder attempt of a San Francisco police officer. One of the primary witnesses, Reuben Scott, whose testimony was the reason for the arrest of the three, confessed years later to having named Bell and Muntakim after being tortured by the police. A ballistic report by the Federal Bureau of Investigation also revealed later that the bullets found on the bodies of the officers did not match the bullets in the guns found on the three at the time of their arrest. Muntakim was found guilty of murder charges in 1974 and received his life sentence in 1993 after a delay of 22 years. Attempts to have the conviction reviewed or the sentences commuted in light of new evidence was rejected by the authorities. In jail, Muntakim continued his civil rights activism by organizing the prison inmates. He formed the National Prisoners Campaign in 1976 and was instrumental in getting the United Nations to recognize the existence of scores of political prisoners, many of whom were his comrades from the BPP. On Sunday, Jordan's King Abdullah issued a royal edict to dissolve the country's parliament in view of the upcoming parliamentary elections in the country. The Election Commission had announced in July this year plans for holding the elections on the 10th of November. Following the parliament's dissolution, the Jordanian government is now constitutionally obligated to resign within 1 week. It will continue in caretaker capacity until a new government is elected. The outgoing parliament consists of 130 legislators, most of them from a pre-existing, deeply entrenched ruling elite class made up of pro-monarchy and pro-government officials, influential businessmen, and former high-ranking officials from the military and intelligence establishment. The ruling establishment in Jordan, including both the monarchy and the government, are currently dealing with a wide range of issues affecting the country. These include serious long-term economic problems, a growing political opposition, social unrest, and widespread uncertainty about the future. These have been aggravated by the pandemic situation, which has seriously disrupted the lives of ordinary Jordanians. In an attempt to address some of these issues, the king had appointed a new prime minister in 2018. However, since then, the economic situation has only worsened, with the national economy shrinking by 6% in 2020. The unemployment rate reached 19.3% in the beginning of this year. The new prime minister's appointment was followed by violent government suppression of teachers' protests and a massive crackdown against the country's largest teachers' union. Teachers have been protesting since September 2019 against the government's failure to keep up its promises of salary hikes and other work-related benefits. The government has also used the protests as an excuse to curtail civil and political liberties of citizens. Gag orders were issued to the media, forbidding them from covering news of protests which are critical of the government and the monarchy or portray those in power in a negative light. On Sunday, Foreign Minister Mokhtar Ouen was named as Mali's interim prime minister by the transitional government. The move is aimed at the lifting of sanctions imposed in Mali by the West Africa regional bloc following the military coup last month. The appointment of a civilian prime minister was a major condition imposed by the West African Regional Economic Bloc, ECOWAS, in order to lift the sanctions. Ouen served as Mali's ambassador to the United Nations between 1995 to 2002 and as foreign minister between 2004 to 2011. Last week, former defense minister and retired Colonel Major Banantois was appointed president, while Colonel Assimi Goïta, head of the junta that staged the coup, was installed as Mali's new vice president. The former president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, had announced his resignation and dissolution of the parliament on the 18th of August after the military arrested him and then Prime Minister Boubou Cissé. The country had been witnessing popular protests in the months leading up to the coup against alleged corruption, presence of foreign troops, and rising religious extremism. The people of Mali continue to demand the withdrawal of the French and other foreign troops from the country. Under Operation Barkhane, around 5,000 French troops have been deployed in Mali since 2013 to fight the extremist Islamist groups such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the West African region. Locals have reported several human rights violations by these soldiers. Progressive student groups in Austria have registered a strong protest against the raising of fees for non-EU students by the Austrian Federal Ministry of Education, Science and Research. The decision was taken under the directive of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Last week, the Communist Student Association came up with a statement criticizing the fee hike and extending its solidarity with Ramiro Wong, a Peruvian student of the University of the Applied Arts, Vienna. Wong had started a hunger strike against the fee hike. According to reports, the crisis began when the University of Applied Arts, Vienna decided to enforce tuition fee ordinance 2019 directed by the Austrian Federal Ministry to introduce higher tuition fees for non-EU and EEA students. These tuition fees depend directly on whether a student belongs to the group of lower middle income or upper middle income countries and territories, categories made by the OECD. For many international students, the amount has increased from 0 to 740 euros per semester. In his petition against the fee hike, Ramiro Wong has said that universities are autonomous, which means that they can decide if, when, how, and to what extent to enforce ministry policies. In its statement, the Communist Students Group has called for the suspension of all tuition fees, including for non-EU and EEA citizens. On Sunday, a fresh round of clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region broke out, raising concerns about the possibility of a full-fledged war. Sunday's clashes alongside the border continued on Monday morning and are reported to be the most intense since 2016. Scores of people, both fighters and civilians, have reportedly been killed in the
was important to me, right? Help in my own development and influence was I used to be good in school. I was good in school. School was never a problem for me. However, math, one of the things that I love, I used to get tutored. And one of the person who used to tutor me was John Carlos. John Carlos, some of you may know, was the iconic photo of him and Tommy Smith at the Olympics, 1968 Olympics, with the fist up in the air, right? Well, he was one of my tutors, right? And so I grew up in that kind of era of people engaged in struggle, engaged in support of Black ideas, Black liberation, Black thought, right? And so I was always have been in support of that kind of thinking at that time. When I was 15, my mom, for my 15th birthday, she bought me a conga drum, right? That was my 15th birthday. And I learned how to play the congas. I was involved in a group called the Afro Brotherhood, right? And that's my cultural nationalist days, right? When I was actually into the idea of being, that cultural nationalism was going to be a form of liberation. It was where the boobas and the dashikis and the bees and the dark glasses and play the conga drums, you know, the whole idea. Trying to learn some Swahili, was unable to do so. Because, you know, we didn't even have no teachers or anything like that, you know, learning off the cuff. But when I saw the Black Panthers, I think it was in 1968, going to Sacramento to fight against the Mumford Act, which was when Reagan was the president was the governor of California. He tried to prevent us from carrying weapons. At the time, the law was that we had open carry, like they have in some states today. But when the Panthers was open carrying, they wanted to change the law. So they changed the law, and it was called the Mumford Act. And so the Panthers went to Sacramento, the capital of Sacramento, carrying their weapons to oppose the implementing of the Mumford Act. And when I saw that, I said, these are some black guys that I won't be a part of.
It's a broad question, but can you talk a little bit about what the experience of prison in that long is like, and how you survived, intact, strong, with your politics intact, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, let me just say this here. Prison ain't for the weak, right? But I also want to say this also. Prison ain't no place for one to seek to go to either, all right? Especially for the young kids and out there involved in these gangs and street organizations, so forth and so on, and have no disregard for other people's lives or even for their own in that respect. Prison is not a place for you to get your street creds, right? Prison is a place where you are actually being exploited by the system, okay? So in my understanding, because I was political before I went into prison, I remained to be political while I was in prison. I became an organizer while I was in prison for the most part. I started the first revolutionary national newspaper, prison newspaper called Arm the Spirit while I was in San Quentin prison. I started the first, organized the first march on Washington, D.C. And also started had the first petition ever submitted to the United Nations by prisoners that was heard by members of the United Nations. Was a UN prisoners petition campaign in regards to political prisoners. First time the issue was political prisoners ever brought to the United Nations. I organized that. And also in 1998, I started the first a national organization called Jericho Movement. As a result of having people march, what we call a Jericho March, to Washington, D.C. In respect to the issues of the existence of political prisoners. Jericho now have been in existence for going on over 20 years, right? I'm co-founder of Jericho along with my sister, Sophia Bukhari, and my dear brother, Baba Herman Ferguson. God bless, they rest in peace. Both of them, they're with the ancestors. And so I'm the only living co-founder of the Jericho Movement, co-founder of the Jericho Movement today. And so we'll find that for me, prison was just an extension of the community in terms of my organizing and trying to deal with the issues of it being in prison and recognizing that there's a system that created a condition for our people, particularly Black and brown people, to be sent in prison en masse, right, en masse. And so all the time I was in prison, I organized. I used to teach Black history classes. I used to teach sociology classes. I used to teach poetry classes, and I used to organize. So that's how I survived prison. I survived prison by continuing to live the spirit of the party, live the spirit of the movement, and being of service to our people, inside and outside of prison. That's how I survived.
In order for this campaign to be successful, you're going to have an understanding of what the Fulton County Conviction Integrity Unit is. So I printed up a few statements that I wanted to share with you that should give you some insight into why we're excited about the opportunity to present to them. The mission statement says the Conviction Integrity Unit will conduct collaborative good faith case reviews designed to ensure the integrity of a conviction and remedy wrongful convictions, as well as establish policies and procedures to learn from the errors identified so the criminal justice system is strengthened. So that's the mission statement, but I also wanted to read you the first couple paragraphs of the press release. So it says, the Office of the Fulton County District Attorney is pleased to announce the establishment of the Conviction Integrity Unit. This new unit will re-examine questionable convictions, such as ours, and help guard against future conviction error, which will be a blessing. Mr. Paul Howard, Fulton County District Attorney, believes prosecutors can and should be leading the charge to ensure the public has confidence in the criminal justice system. I'm going to stop there because that's funny, because every federal judge that we've gone in front of has talked about the gross and ridiculous, egregious prosecutorial misconduct that we experienced in our case. So the fact that he wants to reestablish that trust is excellent, and he could start right here. In recent years, DNA exonerations have shown flaws in our system. Mr. Howard is committed to finding any flaws in convictions his office has obtained, correcting those flaws, and preventing them in the future. He then goes on to be quoted to say, as prosecutors, we have a legal obligation and an ethical mandate to protect the innocent by ensuring only the guilty are convicted for the crimes charged. Our responsibility to all citizens further requires us to seek to remedy any wrongful convictions of which we become aware. And so, all that being said, it's our job to make them aware that this was one of those wrongful convictions that they need to overturn. And I'm not the only one who feels this way. Before we get out of here, I wanted to read to you a statement by Atlanta's favorite son, so to speak, Ambassador Andrew Young, Jr. I want to talk about a case that weighs heavy on my heart because I really think he was wrongfully convicted. A Muslim who helped clean up Atlanta's West End. I'm talking about Jamil Al-Amin, H-Rap Brown. I think it's time to rejudge. He's been dying of cancer and has been suffering away from his family in the worst prisons of the nation. Anything you can do, even bring him home to be close to his family and friends. We must stand for justice, but we must never forget mercy. Ambassador Andrew Young. For 20 years now, we've been trying to get access to Mr. James Santos, aka Otis Jackson. For 20 years, he has confessed to the crime that my father has served 20 years for. For 20 years, he hasn't wavered in his testimony. We've had the documents. We've just never been able to hear his voice or see his face as he tells us that he's the man who committed this crime. Until now.
Mr. Santos, can you please state and spell both your first and last name for the court reporter?
Yes, sir. James Santos, JamesSantos.
One of the main reasons why you've never heard from Mr. Santos or he didn't testify in our original case is because he's been painted as delusional or mentally incompetent, but that's just not the case. Mr. Santos is well within his wits. In fact, he's intelligent, but you don't have to take my word for it. He was actually evaluated and cleared by a clinical psychologist in 2017 before being allowed to testify in another unrelated murder trial.
Mr. Santos, can you take a look at that report and see if you recognize that to be the report that was completed following Dr. Hudson's mental health evaluation of you in 2017?
Yes, sir.
Does it appear to be a fair, and true, and accurate depiction of that report?
Yes, sir.
At this time, I'd request to move into evidence what's been marked as defense 28.
Mr. Spider said there was no objection.
That is correct, Your Honor. I'd like clarification about the dates of this one. It said August 2017. Clarification that predates.
Yes, sir. So for clarification, Mr. Santos, it looks like the evaluation was done on July 31st. The date of the report is August 1st, 2017. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
28 was defense exhibit 28 will be admitted.
Mr. Santos, based on his evaluation, did Dr. Hudson ultimately opine that you demonstrated a factual and rational appreciation of the legal process with no evidence of a mental illness or intellectual deficit, further finding that you have an agenda for providing testimony which is consistent with your philosophies, lifestyle, and life history? Is that all correct?
Yes, sir.
Crazy what you can find out when you ask an expert. What's also interesting is that though the description given by the victims was not accurate in describing Imam Jamil Al-Amin, it did describe someone else. The primary descriptors being 5'8", 5'9", with cold gray eyes. Now, I don't know if Mr. Santos has cold gray eyes, but I wonder how tall he is.
How tall are you?
5'8".
Another element of the description given was that the shooter was wounded. My father was not wounded, and other officers attested to the fact that the victims were indeed marksmen. So if they said they wounded the shooter was wounded. However, Mr. Santos was wounded. But I'm not going to play a short clip of him saying he was wounded. From this point forward, I'll just play his entire testimony about that night, followed by a reading of the written confessions he's provided in the past.
From October of 13th of 1997 until December 22nd of 2000, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Do those dates.
Yes, sir. October 13th, 1997 to December 22nd of 2000.
Yes, sir.
All right. Isn't it true that during that incarceration, you contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation and told them that you had committed a murder and were involved in the shooting of a cop in March of 2000 in Atlanta, Georgia?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
All right. And you couldn't have because you were in prison in Nevada, right?
No, sir. I got out of prison in 2000 in February. I was on house arrest when the murder took place. You might want to check that out. I was on house arrest. I was staying at 2380 Jernigan Street, Southwest Atlanta.
You just said that you were incarcerated in Las Vegas in 1997 through December of 2000.
I went back to prison after that shooting. I was violated and sent back to prison after the police shooting. That's why it says BP by my name. That's parole violation. If you look at the photo, it says BP beside my number. That means parole violation.
You violated your probation because you went back to prison.
Exactly. I violated after the shooting.
You were interviewed by the Federal Bureau of Investigations for that out there in Nevada prison, were you not, in July?
Yes, sir.
Of that year?
Yes, sir.
And he ruled you out and said you did not commit that murder in Las Vegas, correct?
I don't know what
that murder in Atlanta.
I have no idea what his conclusion was, sir.
All right, you weren't arrested for it, were you?
No, sir, I was not.
In fact, another person was tried and convicted.
Jamil Alameen, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And once again, it seems to me like you were getting a lot of
I was shot that day.
I'm sorry?
I was shot March of 2000. It happened March 17th of 2000.
Your Honor, we can take a break right now. Come back.
Okay. All right, we'll take it then, man.
After that, I'd probably need a break too, because that was information that was never supposed to make it into the record. As you can see, they try to discredit him at every turn, but it's not possible. He was there. He was out of prison. He was living in Atlanta. And most importantly, he was wounded in the commission of this crime. So now we have a man who has confessed to the crime, who fits the description of the crime, who was in the area during the commission of the crime, who was shot during the commission of the crime. What more do we need, at least, to look at the case again? He didn't testify in the first case. If you think he's crazy, put him on the stand. Prove it. But this is the man who committed the murder that my father served 20 years for. This is the man who was also willing and able to take responsibility for that still to this day. So if nothing else, we deserve a new trial just based on this. But as you've seen, we have plenty of reasons for it. So if you were on the fence, please sign the petition. Please share the petition. We have to let the Conviction Integrity Unit, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, and Mr. Paul Howard know that we're paying attention and we demand fairness and justice in this matter. As always, it's free, Imam Jamil, and I'm going to leave you with a reading of an article about the confessions, which will give you some more detailed insight into what he's been saying for the last 20 years. This man deserves to be heard. He just doesn't want the imam to be taking the fall for a murder that he committed. It's that simple. Otis Jackson is a self-proclaimed leader of the Almighty Vice Lords Nation. Founded in the late 1950s, the AVLN is one of the oldest street gangs in Chicago. According to Jackson, the group under his leadership was focused on rebuilding communities by pushing out drug dealers and violence. In a never-before-published sworn deposition, Jackson recalls the events of the night of Thursday, March 16, 2000 in vivid detail. It was a cool night, as Jackson remembers. He wore a knee-high black Islamic thobe with black pants, a black kufi, Muslim head covering, underneath a tan hat, and a tan leather jacket. His silver sunglasses with yellow tint sat above his full beard and mustache. He arrived at Mix around 7 p.m. when he realized his schedule had changed. He was no longer the food expediter in the kitchen. His title was now dishwasher cook, which meant he would wash dishes and then help close the kitchen at night. Since his title changed, he wasn't required to work that Thursday night. It immediately dawned on him that he had a 10-hour window to do whatever he wanted. As a parolee under house arrest, the opportunity to have truly free time was rare if it ever even existed. Jackson decided to fill his newfound freedom like most people fill their free time. He ran a few errands. His first stop was the West End Mall, where he got a bite to eat, did some shopping, and then headed toward the West End Community Mosque, led by Al-Amin. He knew it was a regular building off of Oak Street, but wasn't sure which one exactly. He parked his black Cadillac in an open field and walked down toward a house that turned out to be the mosque. He passed the black Mercedes before he got to the mosque, where he met a man named Lamar Mustafa Tanner. They talked for a while, during which Jackson explained to Tanner that he was looking for Al-Amin to talk about how the AVLN could help Al-Amin's community. Tanner told Jackson to check the grocery store, since Al-Amin could usually be found there. Tanner then gave Jackson his phone number and hurried away to go pick up his wife. Jackson proceeded to the grocery store. He wanted to discuss with Al-Amin how his AVLN group could help further clean the streets of drug dealers in the West End community. By the time Jackson made his way to Al-Amin's store, it was already late. He was afraid the store would be closed since he didn't see anyone else on the street. His fear was affirmed. The store wasn't open. Hoping that maybe the owner would be in the back closing up, he knocked on the door a few more times. No answer. As he turned to leave, Jackson saw a patrol car pull up. By the time Jackson walked by the black Mercedes, the patrol car was parked in front of it, nose to nose. The driver of the patrol car got out and asked Jackson to put his hands up. Immediately, the scenario flashed through Jackson's head. Here he was, violating his parole by not being at work with a 9mm handgun in his waist. Jackson was afraid the cops would think he was breaking into the store. That meant they would probably frisk him and find the gun. The gun would be a direct violation of his parole, and he'd be sent back to prison in Nevada. Jackson ignored the order to put his hands up and instead began to explain that he was not trying to break into the store. He stated that he wasn't trying to steal the Mercedes either. His car was parked down the street. Both officers were out of the car with guns drawn and demanding Jackson put his hands up. The cops were closing in, and there was little space between them. Jackson made a quick decision. He backed up against the Mercedes, pulled out his gun, and began to fire. He fired off 2 shots. The officers, while retreating, returned fire. Jackson wasn't hit and bolted toward his car, where in the trunk he had an arsenal of other weapons. As Jackson explained, the organization I was about to form, the Almighty Vice Lord Nation, were anti-oppression, and we fight, drug dealers and whatnot, so we need artillery. He quickly opened the trunk. The lock was broken and held together with shoestring, and grabbed a lightweight semi-automatic carbine Ruger Mini 14 with an extended clip housing 40 .223 caliber rounds. Jackson then headed back toward the cops. One was moving for cover behind the Mercedes, the other on the police radio screaming for backup. Jackson approached the officer he thought was the most aggressive, who was using the Mercedes for cover, and resumed firing his rifle. The officer returned fire, hitting Jackson in the upper left arm twice. Jackson, now angered and fearful for his life, shot back, downing the officer. Jackson stood over him and shot him in the groin up to 4 times. The fallen officer, Deputy Kenshin, in a last attempt to plead with his killer, described his family, mother, and children to Jackson, hoping for mercy. But Jackson admits that by this time, my mind was gone, so I really wasn't paying attention. Jackson fired again at the officer on the ground, dripping his own blood on the concrete where he stood. Jackson then turned his attention to Deputy English, who was running toward the open field. Jackson believed English was flagging down another officer. He couldn't let him get away. Jackson hit English 4 times. 1 shot hit him in the leg. He soon fell, screaming, thereby confirming Jackson's shot. After English went down, Jackson, in a state of shock, walked down past the mosque. Nursing his bleeding wounds, he tried to stop 3 passing cars on the road. No one dared to pull over. He then walked back down the street and knocked on 3 different doors for assistance. Only one even turned the light on, but no one opened the door for Jackson. He then made his way back to his car and drove to his mother's home. As he walked in the door, the phone rang. His mother was asleep, so Jackson hurriedly answered it in the other room. It was a representative from the Sentinel company that provided the monitoring service for Jackson's ankle bracelet. The man on the phone asked where Jackson was. He responded that he was at work. The Sentinel representative explained that his unaccounted for absence would have to be marked down as a violation. Jackson agreed and quickly ended the conversation. Although one bullet exited through the back of his arm, the other was still lodged in his upper left arm. Jackson called a couple of female friends who were registered nurses. The women, who were informed by Jackson that he was robbed in the middle of the night, arrived at his house and worked for 3 hours to remove the bullet from his arm. Jackson then called Mustafa Tanner, whom he had met earlier in the evening, and asked him to come by his house. Tanner arrived before 10 a.m. Jackson explained what had happened the previous night and said he needed to get rid of the guns and the car. Jackson's car trunk contained enough artillery for a mini militia, 3 Ruger Mini 14 rifles, an M16 assault rifle, a .45 handgun, 3 9mm handguns, and a couple of shotguns. Once Tanner left, Jackson called his parole officer, Sarah Bacon, and let her know that he had been involved in the situation, but left out the details. In the following days, Jackson was asked to report to the Sentinel Company. He checked in with the monitoring company and his parole officer and was then given a ride back home. As they pulled onto his street, Jackson noticed many unmarked police cars. After entering his driveway, multiple police officers emerged. The police searched Jackson's house and found rounds of Mini 14, .223, 9mm, and M16 ammunition. Jackson's bloody clothes and boots from the shootout with the deputies the night before were left untouched in his closet. On March 28, 2000, Jackson's parole was revoked and he was sent back to prison to serve the remainder of his sentence in Nevada. Upon his detainment in Florida and later transfer to Nevada, Jackson confessed the crime to anyone who would listen. Jackson claims that when he reached the Clark County Jail in Las Vegas, Nevada, he made numerous phone calls to the FBI, after which an agent arrived to discuss the incident with him. Jackson recalls telling his story to Special Agent Mahoney. Special Agent Devin Mahoney recalls documenting the confession, but not much beyond that. Mahoney remembers getting a call from a superior to talk to someone in Las Vegas jail and then to document it and file it up the chain of command. The confession was documented and filed on June 29th, 2000. And that's the last time anybody heard of it. Sign the petition, share the petition, free Imam Jamil.
Watching 11 Alive News at 5:30.
As a suspect in the shootings of 2 deputies fights extradition back to Georgia, old friends paint a different picture of a man accused of murder.
He took a community that was infested with prostitution and drugs and drug dealers, and he cleaned it up.
Good evening again. I'm Dee O'Reilly in for Brenda Wood.
And I'm West Sergeant Jamil Al-Amin will stay put in Alabama for now, at least until he can be indicted on the charges he faces here in Georgia. The suspect in the shooting of 2 Fulton deputies is being held in Montgomery and was arraigned yesterday on Alabama charges. Al-Amin's lawyer is fighting any attempts to bring his client back to Atlanta. He claims Al-Amin is being framed. Authorities here say Al-Amin won't be indicted until Friday, and the process of bringing him back cannot happen until then. We have team coverage on this still developing story. Jennifer Leslie's in Montgomery and Mark Picard is here in Atlanta with more on what one of Al-Amin's old friends is saying about the former Black Panther. We begin with Jennifer in Alabama.
Westman federal agents zeroed in on Jamil Al-Amin in Whitehall, about 30 miles southwest of here. They wanted to see if anyone else was helping him hide. If so, they could face charges of harboring a fugitive. Agents did take 4 people into custody, but they were never technically arrested and never charged. Today, one of them is speaking out. On his way to work Monday night, Clarence Rashid and his family were stopped by federal authorities who were searching the area for Jamil Al-Amin.
We were surrounded and told to put our hands up. And one by one, we were extracted from the car. We were laid on the ground, handcuffed.
Rashid's daughter was released, but he and his wife and 2 others were taken from the scene of the manhunt to the Montgomery City Jail.
They stripped the women, they stripped us. They put us in orange suits, and put us in cells. And we never were told. And I kept asking the same question: what are we being held for? What are we being charged with?
He spent the night in jail just down the hall from the cell where Al-Amin was kept under close guard.
All he said was just be patient. That's all he said. He's a man of few words. He doesn't. He just said be patient.
16 hours later, Rashid and his wife were released. No charges were filed, and they say no explanation was given.
If you're innocent until proven guilty, then where is that? Where's the boundaries to this? You know, when are people going to be given some level of dignity in that period of innocence?
Clarence Rashid says agents really didn't ask him many questions other than does he know Al-Amin? He does. In fact, he's part of a Muslim community that Al-Amin was trying to establish in Whitehall. But Rashid says he had no role in Al-Amin's flight. Live in Montgomery, Jennifer Leslie, 11 Alive News.
Thank you, Jennifer.
The fact that Jamil Al-Amin is now a suspect in an act of violence and bloodshed is a sharp contrast to the life he appeared to have lived recently in Atlanta's West End. The question is, can the once militant former Black Panther H. Rap Brown become the respected peacemaker Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin? 11 Alive's Mark Picard spoke with someone who says yes. Mark?
Dia, Silas Mohammed is following in the footsteps of his mentor, Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, a former Black Panther and now a member of Al-Amin's mosque here in the West End. Mohammed is working to improve his community. He says Al-Amin would not do what he is accused of doing. Prayer is now a part of Silas Mohammed's life as a Muslim. It has not always been so.
I shot a guy.
He went to jail for battery 6 years ago.
When I went to jail, Mr. Al-Amin came and counseled me. He also put money on my books. He's an excellent brother.
When he got out, Muhammad joined Al-Amin's mosque, followed his teaching, followed his example. He concedes Al-Amin's past colors his present, but says that's unfair.
He took a community that was infested with prostitution and drugs and drug dealers, and he cleaned it up. But this is not being looked at. What's being looked at is the fact that he was H. Rap Brown, a rowdy brother.
As a Muslim, says Muhammad, Al-Amin would never advocate violence, which brings Silas Muhammad to this bold statement.
I know that Jamil Al-Amin did not shoot any police officers that night.
Would you put your hand on the Quran and say that?
Yes, sir, I would.
Would you stake your life on that?
Yes, sir, I will.
While he waits for Al-Amin to return to Atlanta,
yes,
Silas Muhammad will raise money for his legal defense, and he will pray. Silas Muhammad says that there are people in this community who revere and respect and love Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, and that there are people here who would do anything to protect him. That includes shooting at Fulton County Sheriff's deputies. Dia?
Mark, if Silas Muhammad says Al-Amin didn't pull the trigger, does he know who did?
Well, I asked him that, and he said he would not answer for two reasons. He said he fears self-incrimination, and he also respects the code of silence. But he did say he hopes and expects that important information will be revealed during the court process.
We're out here this morning, primarily to discuss the case of Imam Jamil. He has been wrongfully incarcerated in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, not in Atlanta, Georgia, but via the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for 20 plus years now. We've been able to locate a confession, a video confession of the man who actually committed this crime. We've had signed affidavits for years from the man who has actually committed
And we are very excited to introduce Mike Chambers from ATL. He's one of our starting performers for our event this evening. He is an artist from Atlanta, and he's going to be sharing some art with you all. Inshallah, please enjoy Mike Chambers.
Brother, we can't hear you. We can see you, but we can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me up? I can't hear nobody. I can't hear nothing. Can you? Wow.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
We want to we're about to hear from the brother you're about to hear from his brother. We call him Uncle Hap. In Atlanta, we call him Uncle Hap. His name is Jamil, and he's going to do a piece that was written by our Amir, Imam Jamil Abdul-Alameen. And the piece is called Holocaust. Written by Imam Jamil Alameen, delivered by the real deal, Jamil.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ikhwan, y'all already know how our brother Imam get down. This is an original piece from him called The Holy Cause. And some crimes can never be forgiven, son. This is one. Holy cause. 40-year pause on the cause. Revolutionary hiatus. Battle call. It's a battle I call. If not for the love of Allah, don't care about none of y'all. Murder rap. Everybody want to murder rap. Take the word of rap like they never heard of rap. Rap double entrees. Illuminating thoughts like sun rays. My ellipsis ain't never slipped, says. Riffing Nova, stolen defeat. The quiet of the noise, too loud for the beat. Message to the heart, hard to ear. No ubris allowed as I step away from the crowd. No self-aggrandizement meant. War is the king's final argument. Remembrance of the creator's divinity, a drink of infinity. Sublime instructions beamed into genetic memory. Backed by hostile demand, down by law. What made you think rap ain't raw? To exist is to resist. Joker conspiracy theorists say, rap, why so serious? COINTEL shout out, shoulda took the doubt out. Last brother alive from the starting five. Allah slave from the womb to the tomb. Now, nobody leave the room without exit wounds. From prophetic to pathetic, rap and hip hop ain't the same. Rap, educate. Hip hop, entertain. Truth is a trust. Falsehood is a treason. Truth is the cry of all but the discipline of the few. There is no worse lie greater than the truth misunderstood by those who say they knew. Rap is the door hip hop came through. 40-year pause on the cause. Now windows accusing the door of abusing the wall. Love it or leave it, Allah's slave is on top. Without rap, ain't no hip hop. Identity theft thieves, rap fake IDs, LPs and CDs, chopping up feces for cheese. Gutter utterance for financial furtherance. Perpetrators, pay-per-view, paper traders, paper traitors take the word of rap like they never heard of the lyrical murderer. If y'all stunting and swagging like y'all claim, how come the game ain't in your name? Rap against the Fed and point spread. I don't dance or sing. Names still all up in there, music hall of fame. Rap, fundamentalist, jihadist, metaphorist. Righteous rhymes, married to the word, hooked on phonics. Ebonics is euphonics. Trespassers try to see past my past. Wide receivers, underachievers trying to catch my pass. Rite of passage, rhyme sage. Rite of passage, the middle passage, rite of rage. I passed through the past, so I passed. We survived the hard blow, and I want you to know you'll face us at last. I let the insult pass, judged by some click from some counterfeit click, cause I'm cool like this. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Now let the alpines blast. Words of dexterity,
verbal words of clarity, verbal dexterity, ever clever in this endeavor. Rap on a whole nother level. Survival is a crime when you're a target of the devil. The sword and pen are twins. Remembrance of Allah is my only friend. Now take heed as I make the pen bleed, dancing with the scars, the people's choice. The brother with the muscle in his voice, toast to toast from coast to coast to all you haters who thought I was ghost. Audio illusionist, losing it, using my name and abusing it. Haters thought I was gone, but I stepped back from the microphone. So MCs and FemCs who grew up late, blew up late, could get they swerve on. They didn't know my mic was still on. Kill the lights, dead dim mics. I got lame noses open like breed, right? Mic check, mic check. Mic check MCs and FemCs on stage, grabbing no crotch like gronial colleges. Encroachment collabos, coitus interruptus. Silly bling, silly bus. Syllabus real pusillanimous. Trying to hit a straight lick with a crooked stick. Message to the music. Brown versus Board of Miseducation. Miseducation. Indoctrination, genocide. Neutral education. Education is never neutral. Cultural dependence brings with it economic and political dependence. Slavery, odd I see. The audacity. Scholars for dollars masturbating, scholars for dollars masturbating in fantasies, producing Anglophile insanity, paralysis of analysis, mental prothesis, vulture of culture, evolution of the species, failed state, Eurocentric separation of church and ape, planet of the ape, bigotry and hate, belief in the deity they seek to eradicate, nation state, the idol they venerate, disbelief they celebrate, a beast raised from the earth, the naked ape speaks to the disbelievers and seal their fate, unholy materialistic bargains, fig leaves sewn together, fig leaves sewn together to cover spiritual organs. The devil's greatest trick is to make you think he don't exist. The original sin, forgetting his own origin. Missing link is the missing ink. White bread and wine, breed all about it. Axis of evil. European Union, coalition of the willing. UN, Euro BPing in the Gulf. Righteous rage against Eurocentric war crimes and death brigades. Constant struggle against the beast with the nuclear teeth. Too apocalyptic. Armageddon. Armageddon loud. Snatch the cover off this war crime crowd. Some crimes can never be forgiven, son. This is one. Holy cause. Dear mama, too many kings done come chasing crucifixion and throwing Hail Mary's son. Dying man crosses and Jesus chains, riding solo in the carpool lane. In peace, strong. In battle, strongest. I come to settle this mess. There'll be peace in the east before there's west in the, there'll be peace in the east before there's rest in the west. Eurocentrics, civilized, the sucker lied. Slavery, the audacity. Some crimes can never be forgiven, son. This is one. Holy cause. Free Imam Jamil. Free Imam Jamil. Free Imam Jamil. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Free them all. Y'all know the call. Free them all.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Brother Jamil, for that awesome performance. We're looking forward to having more performances. So Atlanta and DC have collaborated on this platform to give you our art. I have a very special guest with me right now. You want to introduce yourself? Yes. What is your name?
My name is Azari.
And so Azari is how old?
I'm 6 years old.
And what will we be doing today?
We will.
Come to the mic.
Well, we will be doing a poem about
H. Rap Brown. Who have you been drawing, right? And so we're going to be doing a special mom and daughter poem just to, let the mothers and daughters out there know to use their voices and to use their activism. And that is a way to communicate with your children and letting them know and educating them about political prisoners. And so our poem goes like this, and I'm going to get her together so that I can share my piece, because you know how 6-year-olds can be. You ready? All right. One fist.
One voice.
One fist.
One voice.
One fist.
One voice.
Wow. That's a powerful voice right there. And so we have one nation under attack. They killing us like animals, endangered, and I'm black. My black don't crack, and neither do my people. One fist.
One voice.
One fist.
One voice.
One fist.
One voice.
They ain't never treated us equal. What's rights to a black man when they doing all these things that's illegal? Free.
Imam Jamil.
Free.
Imam Jamil.
Free.
Imam Jamil.
One fist.
One voice.
One fist.
One voice.
I need everybody at home to say one fist.
One voice.
One voice. One voice. And one voice. Thank you. Thank you so much, Azari, and everybody at home. I hope that you understand how important it is to hold your fist up and not be ashamed of your voice. You have to speak up. And so I'm going to share this next poem for you all. All right. So this poem I particularly wrote about I'm going to just do it for y'all because it doesn't even matter, right? And so it goes, trap or die. More like we were trapped to die in a system designed to never let us succeed. Different skin tones and colors, but we all bleed. My country, tears of thee. Man, I'm sick of the bull. I'm feeling like a purge coming in. I need a full clip. Watching my city change to best fit the needs of our lighter skinned residents. I mean, I'm not going to fake like I wasn't pressed to have a black president, but it's all clear and evident who's still in control. Puppets politicking and protecting they role. This land stole from my 40 fathers. Black men don't be absent because our children need their fathers. I said, black men don't be absent because our children need their fathers. Mothers unite. And I'm so suited and booted to fight. Like how Jamil Al-Amin was always ready to fight. Where's the light? Because I got to shine it on what really matters. Education stole from us, but we still getting our masters. I said education stole from us, but we still getting our masters. Oh, you didn't know the ratio and facts? No, boo-boo. Black people don't just trap and rap. You just only have access to keep you in your trap, and I'm just trying to learn the 50 shades of H rap. I said I'm just trying to learn the 50 shades of H rap. But see, they trying to knock us down because we brown. See, I'm from uptown and you don't even know how it goes down in my town. It's like we trapped to die. More like we are trapped to die. And the system designed to never let us succeed. Different skin tones and colors, but we all bleed. Thank you. Dr. Yu, are you there? Okay.
Please, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So our next performance is going to be a brother from Washington, D.C. And I believe, matter of fact, I'm going to save this. This is a prize. We're going to see what this next brother's talent is. I'm not even going to tell you. I don't want to spoil it. Dr. Yu.
All right, peace, everyone. I'm going to share an improvised rhythm that's based on the traditional West African rhythm that's a celebration for our warriors. So I hope you enjoy as a tribute to those of us who sacrificed themselves as political and became political and an energetic strength for them.
Thank you, brother. We want to thank you so much for that spirited drum performance. You know, we start with the drum. You know, in Atlanta, every time Imam Jamil would speak publicly, like not in the masjid, but outside the masjid, we would always have the drummers come. We have community drummers come, and we've had them come for every time we've had a community rally that IJAN has that IJAN has called. In Atlanta, we've had the community drummers come, and that which Brother You just performed was very typical of how we do things in the West End, how we do things in our community nationally. We're about to close now. We have a performance, a recorded performance by Brother Ishmael Turner, also known as Ishmael the First. Sometimes he's the first one on when we do a rally or something, but he's known as Ishmael the First. And when we began this program of activists for Imam Jamil, Brother Ishmael was the first recording that we did was this recording by Ishmael Turner, by Ishmael the First, known as Santos Shot the Sheriff. You've been hearing all night about this person, James Santos. You've even seen him. This is a song, you're familiar with the song by Bob Marley, I Shot the Sheriff. This is a song that we wrote called Santos Shot the Sheriff, and where vocalist, guitarist Ishmael Turner, Ishmael the First, is telling the story in his own words. We thank you very much, Ishmael the First.
Someone shot the sheriff, shot that Fulton County deputy. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Someone shot the sheriff, shot that Fulton County deputy. Yes, indeed. All around in our own town, them I say it was a trap round. They said they wanna bring him in guilty for the killing of a deputy, attempted murder on the next deputy. But now we know Santos shot the sheriff. His confession was on the very next day. We know now. Santos shot the sheriff, but them a hunt down his trap round anyway. No. FBI always hated him, and the reason we all know. Every time he stands and shines the light of truth, all the darkness it must have got to go. Yes, the monsters in darkness got to go. And so Santos shot the sheriff, but police refused to go in there and sing. Lord. Santos shot the sheriff, even though only he fits the description. Boy, Lord, open window comes Santos' way, and the government tried to find Alameda. All of a sudden it's the sheriff and deputies, and it turned into one crucial shooting. Yes, it turned into
Okay, thank you very much. That was Ishmael the First. And the first, they say the first shall be last and the last shall be first. That was Ishmael the First. Our last performer for the evening. We thank you. We want you to tune in tomorrow at the same on StreamYard. Tune in on your Facebook pages, on your websites, and tune in tomorrow. 10 a.m. We'll be beginning the session tomorrow. Please tune in. Please join in with us. Free Imam Jamil. Free all political prisoners. Free them all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.